Hello there, welcome to the show. Fiona is still the focus for people in Atlantic Canada this morning, of course. The road to recovery just beginning after that powerful post-tropical storm swept through. You can see there some of the devastating damage, particularly those pictures from Port aux Basques, Newfoundland. It has been hard hit. We talked to the mayor in the last hour who says the landscape there has been entirely changed. There are, though, downed trees, flooded streets, and in some cases destroyed homes. Power is out still for around 500,000 people in Atlantic Canada. Cleanup efforts still very much in early stages, and Canadian Armed Forces have been requested by Nova Scotia, many of them on the ground already and on the way. We talked to the Nova Scotia Premier last hour, who told us that while the damage is significant and it will take days, he is confident that it will be dealt with. Prime Minister Trudeau is also promising federal assistance for other provinces. And on that point now, let me bring in the Minister for Emergency Preparedness, Bill Blair. Minister Blair, thanks for making the time this morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Rosie.
So you've had a meeting already of the incident response group. I think there's another one today. What is top of mind right now for federal response?
Well, we've been preparing for this and working with the provinces that are impacted by this storm for several days. And our first priority was protection of lives and getting through the storm. But as the storm is now passing through Canadian territory and out and back out to sea, we're moving into a phase of recovery. And so much of the work that now needs to be done is supporting the provinces and communities and Canadians in their response. There's still an enormous number of Canadians in Atlantic Canada without hydro, and so there needs to be removal of debris, an assessment of the damage, and we can see already that in many areas there's been significant impact on people's homes and businesses and community infrastructure, in wharves and shorelines, and so the period of recovery, we are working with the provinces to make sure that we provide them with the support and the resources they need to affect that recovery.
What's the latest assessment of the damage at this stage, Minister, from what you've been told? Worse than expected, worse than other kinds of storms we've seen in Atlantic Canada?
Well, I want to acknowledge I think, excellent work that was done by all the provinces and all the communities in preparation for this storm. We did get some pretty fair warning from Environment Canada. Steps were taken to make sure that people were well advised and could take the steps necessary to protect themselves and their property. But the damage is quite extensive, and that assessment's going on today. Clearly, this storm was very impactful. We've seen significant damage in Nova Scotia, in Prince Edward Island, and in the Magdalene Islands, and in particular at Port aux Basques, where in that community, houses and structures have been washed out to sea. There's a significant amount of damage. The full extent of that will be determined over the course of the next couple of days as we begin the important process of recovery.
I was speaking with the mayor of Port aux Basques, Brian Button, earlier, and he tells me that there is one missing person in their community, very small community, as you know, and so everyone is aware of it and very concerned. Do you have any details on whether there have been injuries or potentially deaths in this storm?
Well, certainly we've also and are very concerned with that report from Port aux Basques, and I know the RCMP are very actively investigating that, working with the Canadian Coast Guard. But I don't have additional information to confirm that. But I believe that as a result of the warning and the preparation that the provinces and communities undertook in readiness for this storm, notwithstanding it was a very severe storm and there's very significant damage, I think that preparation is evident in the relatively low injury count. And I acknowledge the potential of casualties, and that will be part of our assessment as we go forward today. But people did the right things and took the steps necessary to keep themselves and their loved ones safe, and hopefully we'll be able to get through this without any loss of life.
The federal government has approved Nova Scotia's request for federal funding for disaster assistance. Are there other provinces who have made that request? What's your assessment of whether that will be needed everywhere?
Yes, ma'am. And certainly we've already heard from Prince Edward Island, and we've heard from Newfoundland, particularly for the Port Basque region. All of those requests we're actively working with them, with the Canadian Armed Forces and with other federal departments. As I said, we've all been working together in preparation for this. We anticipated the likelihood that the provinces, this storm, because of its scale and severity, would exceed the capacity of many regions of the country, and we're prepared to bring whatever help is necessary that we have available to us. And so the Canadian Armed Forces in particular has already mobilized in those areas, and we're now dealing with those requests, and we'll deal with them with the same alacrity that we dealt with the one from Nova Scotia, because we know recovery is urgent. People are without power, their lives have been significantly disrupted, and we've got to do everything we can to restore a safe environment that'll assist in the recovery.
Is it your, from what you're getting in terms of your briefings, Minister, is it major infrastructure that is really the most damaged here? I mean, obviously homes as well, but in terms of the roads and power lines, is that sort of the biggest challenge right now?
I think the most immediate problem, Rosie, is the fact that power is down. Still, 250,000 people in Nova Scotia, for example, are still without hydro. A huge percentage of the islanders on Prince Edward Island are currently without hydro, and so we're working very hard with the provinces in order to restore that as quickly as possible. There is an assessment going on. Some of the most significant critical infrastructure, the Confederation Bridge, the Cancel Causeway, a number of our airports, the assessments are being done. There was some significant damage, for example, at the Sydney airport, and at their terminal, but they're working through that, and that recovery is well underway, and so that critical infrastructure I think has sustained some impact, but it's still quite functional. We've lost some bridges and some roadways. All of that's being assessed, and there's still some work to do. There are certain parts of our communities that have been isolated as a result of those roads washed out. I just was briefed this morning. The roadway to Louisbourg on Cape Breton Island has been washed away, and so there's obviously a great deal of work to do, and that work begins today.
One of the things that the Premier of Nova Scotia was talking about, Premier Houston, is that communications are still very much down, and that going forward, that is an area where he feels like Nova Scotia needs to do better so that people can get information, stay in touch, be able to tell their families that they're okay. I wonder on that front whether the federal government, there's anything that you can do on that from that perspective.
Yeah, I will tell you, in preparation for this storm, the telecos were at the table. They were working with us right in the operations centers, the emergency operations centers. We know how important both hydro and power for general day-to-day requirements, but also those telecommunications are critically important. There has been some impact on there. One of the things our government is undertaking is the development of what we call a public safety broadband network, where there will be dedicated resources for public safety response in such an emergency. But certainly, I don't disagree with the Premier. Those communications have become an important part of our lives, Rosie, and we've got to make sure that in an emergency, that valuable asset is available to Canadians. And we're working very hard right now. And I can tell you, like Nova Scotia, for example, has hundreds of additional hydro crews out. Hydro crews have come in from Quebec, up from the United States. It's an all hands on deck to work as quickly as possible to all the impacted communities to restore their hydro, to restore their internet, and then help them begin the recovery, because homes have been damaged, people have lost property, and this is, I'm sure this has been a very frightening and traumatic event for many people. And as they emerge and see the extent of the damage, I want them to be assured that all orders of government and all of us are working as hard as and quickly as possible to bring some normalcy back to their communities.
Minister Blair, it's been a busy weekend for you. Thanks for making the time. Appreciate it, sir.
Thanks very much, Rosie.